inflammation. So the omega-3s counter that, and they cause the wedges to be tighter, so they reinforce the blood-brain barrier while still allowing the porosity for the things that make sense to get through the brain without the toxicity that might want to accompany it. So it's a really delicate balance, but it's incredible. And of course, she explains it way better than I do, but that's Rhonda Patrick. And by the way, Joe, just spent a long, extended 4-hour afternoon with this guy. And
Huberman.
Yeah. What I got to tell you, man, the guy is a genuine rock star, ex-skate punk, right? I mean, all skate punks, I think, qualify for rock star status, but the guy was probably one of the most genuine and giving, authentic people that I'd met in a long time. We handed him, I think you've seen like kind of where we're going with some of our products. We're doing this new magnetic packaging, right? And I handed to Andrew, and he goes, whoa! And he turns around and puts the box down and kind of opens it up. And he's at the stage, and he goes, guys, look at this. Check this out, man. Check this out. I don't know what this is, but it's cool. It's great. So,
yeah. Love that.
Got that going.
Love that. So Mark, I want to dive into sort of this nootropics, yes, brain health, yes, but right now everyone's looking for a solution for distractibility to increase their focus. You've mentioned a few other things, word recall. It seems like this issue that we're having is contagious, but are we just more aware of it, or what's happening in the world today that makes this makes this so widespread? So many people having issues at work, staying focused and whatnot. What do you think?
I think this is a big problem, and I love this. But I think that it's created a pandemic where we are so fueled by the buzz, the click, the ring, right? That and the reinforcement. Our identities are so wrapped up in our electronic devices and who we want the world to think of us as, and even how we see ourselves. I mean, so I think I mentioned in our last get together that my eldest daughter was schizophrenic and eventually committed suicide as a result of her schizophrenia. But one of the things that Chastity and I noticed is she would walk around the house. She was into social media, but didn't want to be recognized as just her social media icon or avatar, right? And every time she walked by a painting, Chastity's a painter, is she would look in the glass for a while. And we thought that she was like examining the painting in fine detail. But in reality, what she was doing was looking at herself in the reflection in the glass. And I think that situation has created, it's wreaking havoc with us. One is it's distorting our own ego because, you never see an Instagram model. It's not a 10 or an 11 in Southern California rating of women, right? Or London or New York or whatever your supermodel standard is. And the other is, so that's a real challenge. And I think it's something we need to look at. And of course, as a result of that, we're also relying on this dopamine reinforcement, right? The dopaminergic, everybody's heard about that. And there's a thing that's becoming more and more widespread, at least more acknowledged, which is dopamine depletion, because we're getting successive dopamine hits. And I think, and that's a pretty major one. I don't know if you've had any of that experience yourself you and I have both spent a not insignificant amount of time both developing and reinforcing and using social media as this great instrument to spread the good news, to spread love and to connect with people that we otherwise never would have met. And so it's a true blessing. But the downside of that is that we can become very reliant on it. And then let's throw something in from the last few years, 2.5 years or so. And COVID has not just increased our dependence on this dopamine activity machine called social media, but it's also, scrambled a lot of brains. I don't know if you've had COVID yet. Have you had to deal with that yet, Justin? So yeah, it's a pain in the ass, right?
Yeah.
It wiped me. I haven't. The last time I was that sick was 1990 when I was breaking some brick in my home, which used to be a bank. It was 1910 home, or breaking the brick, and all of the germs that were alive and viruses that were alive in 1910 were suddenly airborne. We weren't wearing masks. We didn't know to wear masks back then. And both my wife and I at the time, we both got deathly sick for about 2 weeks from a virus that was present in 1910 that we no longer had the immunity to. So it's not just monkeypox, bro. It's not just monkeypox. Flu. Right. Oh, yeah.
Gosh.
So I think that the long, they call it long COVID, Joe. And I think that it's something that we really have to be aware of, that there are some detrimental side effects that are not instantaneous recovery. Like, once my fever went away, once my strength returned, which was like a week and a half journey, there was also suddenly my lungs, the villi and the cilia and in my lungs were not working as well. And so I seemed to have like this constant phlegm thing happening. Upper respiratory seemed to, like, it wasn't an infection. It just wasn't fully functional. And I think we're dealing with a lot of that. I think it's really important that we, like, Joe, you and I talked about sick to superhuman, kind of this scale that we talk about where, and I think that, you got that sick, suboptimal, optimal, super optimal, superhuman, right? So you have this scale that people can go through to kind of, how do you achieve that super optimum, maximum, badass, flash, performance? Well, you don't get there overnight. You get there through the process of knocking off each of your Achilles heels and kind of pressing through each of those things and saying, hey, drinking too many martinis, too many days in a row doesn't make me feel good. I seem to not be as awake during the waking hours, and I seem to sleep worse. Maybe I should quit that crap. Maybe that's not a good thing for me. And then, so now you're going from sick to suboptimal, right? So then you're at suboptimal and you're going, well, maybe there's something else. Maybe some glutathione or some acetylcysteine. Maybe that would be useful to kind of get my liver enzymes working again. Oh yeah. Okay, cool. We do that. And maybe I get a little bit of sleep, a little more sleep, and suddenly, boom, you're at optimal again. You're going into what are your work or your passion or your dream or your job or your career or your art with fire and with vim and vigor, because your body's now starting to clock right again, and you're going out and you're running again, or you're bicycling, or you're lifting, or right, or you're eating good, you're knocking off the stuff that is caustic, and you're staying away from the Cheetos, and so you know what? We're never going to get sponsored by Cheetos now. You know that, right? Like, we're never going to get Cheetos as a sponsor. You and I. I just alienated Cheetos. I really apologize, bro.
Right.
But
I don't think I've had Cheeto in about 20 years, so it's okay.
Yeah, I know exactly. Right. Yeah. There's a great. I won't lend you, but I think Pete Holmes does a great routine on that. But we'll leave that for later.
So, Mark, with the dopamine sort of roller coasters created by the cell phone and maybe, the increased reliance on even, Zoom meetings as an example, as you were talking about your daughter, it's interesting on Zoom, if I have a meeting in person, I can't see myself, right? So in this Zoom world where you're almost looking in the mirror the entire meeting, just like we are now, that's a whole other thing. So when we look at dopamine and maybe some of these highs and lows that are creating some issues, what's the sort of downstream issue with that? In other words, if someone's looking to optimize their brain, maybe taking a couple of days off the cell phone is good, but, maybe a good sort of way to fertilize the soil, so to speak. But in terms of dopamine, having some of those sort of games being played with it, are there any other like key players in the brain that sort of compensate or become depleted or get too high? What's the sort of involvement of some of these other key players in the brain when we have this cell phone that's constantly, playing with our dopamine?
That's a great question, Joe. So, as we've spoken about in previous conversations, we've talked about the kind of the course of events, right? It's an instrumentation, and what we're trying to do, what we want to do is we want to modulate all of the neurotransmitters in a way that are going to give us the optimum result for the thing that we're going into. Matt Gallant, my partner in crime in this, and Wade will talk about states, like being specifically into what state do I need to be in, right? What operating state do I need to be in to be a rock star in the thing I'm trying to do at the moment? And one of the challenges is that we're often, when we're depleting these neurotransmitters, like in this case, we're still on dopamine, but we could be on serotonin, we could be on anandamide, we could be on acetylcholine, right? We could be on GABA. Those are kind of the 4 or 5 key neurotransmitters that we're constantly trying to balance, and we're trying to bring into the band, and we're trying to get the drums and the guitar and the bass and the vocals to all play in the same group, so that we get we get 10 Years Gone from Zeppelin out of it instead of Yanni being hit by a truck. And so it's really important to understand that those neurotransmitters start as precursors to the neurotransmitters, and then they start as signaling to the centers of the brain that say, I need to access some of those neurotransmitters, and I need to do them at this rate so that I get this kind of desired outcome. If you've ever played a sport and you've become competitive in that sport, I hate sports metaphors, but let's try it. Let's play with it. Come on, Joe. If you've ever done a sport and you need to get in state, if it's yoga, right? Let's call it a sport. Let's call it right? It's kind of a system. If you so you want to be really effective at yoga. Well, now you need to kind of bring your state down. You want to bring your awareness up, but you don't want to have a stimulation. You want to get into more of a GABA, more of a flow state, right? So that's GABA dominance. You want to have GABA dominance, but you also want to feel good. You want to feel connected to your peers if you're in like a yoga studio, right? And if we haven't turned the heat up to 120, we want to be able to do this. We want to have this kind of group harmony amongst ourselves, spiritual connectedness between everyone. So we want to have our GABA really high, but we want to have enough serotonin that we feel our heart chakra open. We feel that kind of genuine love for everyone, and we want to feel our spiritual energy coming up and coming out, so that we're able to truly engage in this experience and truly get into what Stephen Kotler would call flow state. And, where we're not thinking about our pose. We are just going into pose, and we're naturally flowing from pose to pose, maybe on command of whoever happens to be leading the class, maybe on our own, right? We kind of know what, kind of like Tai Chi. We know what the next kata is going to be that we're going to go into. We know how the energy flows between those. We know how the hands and that, right? And so we can play with that. So it's really important to understand how to modulate those. But the first thing is, how do we get those precursors? I mean, that's kind of what Nootopia does, right? We're a box of highly sophisticated, highly customized, highly personalized precursors with some signaling molecules that also tell the brain, hey, we've got a bunch of raw product for you here. We can make as much dopamine as you want. We can make as much GABA as you want, as much serotonin as you want, as much acetylcholine. How much do you want? And you know what I mean? It's on demand, and then you can kind of call that up. And each of them oriented towards a little bit different emphasis point. One will be more dopaminergic, one will be more serotonergic, one will be more GABAergic, right? They're all going to have a bit of acetylcholine because it's kind of a master memory and thinking and processing molecule. But yeah, so that's kind of that thing. Did that help?
And people's subjective, absolutely. And when people, so, I love the Nootopia, the World Domination Kit that I've got. And I remember, of course, when I go in there each month and I change my, my sliding scales there and tell you guys, what I want in my box and how I'm feeling. And subjectively, me doing that is probably hitting the right places. So in other words, if I'm depleted in dopamine or GABA as an example, the symptoms that are on the customization, even if I don't know much about GABA, if I'm an average person and I don't understand exactly what my issue is, the process of ordering or the process of going through that protocol where you're customizing your formulas based on how you feel and what you need, that's pretty reliable in terms of me more or less without even knowing self-diagnosing.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you'll notice if you go to Nootopia now and you go to the website now, and I'm sure you've got like a link or something there, Joe, that you can give our listeners.
/Runga.
/Runga. That's it. Nootopia.com/Runga.
That's it.
If you go there, one of the things you'll see is one of the first buttons that you can click, which is right above the fold, is going to say, let's take an assessment, a neurochemical assessment. Let's find out where you're at neurochemically. And we based our insights on both the Braverman test, which is a very well-known neurochemical test, and the fact that we have one of the top AI programmers and technologists in the world on the Nootopia and Bioptimizers team. So he's an incredible brain, and he heads up our tech development. And so he's able to take the aggregate of the hundreds of thousands of customers that we have collectively and the millions of data points that we've collected over the last 14 years on this, and be able to say, oh, when you say this, when you say X, like when your results come back with this, and you tell us that you're 33 years old, you weigh 172 pounds, you work out 4 times a week, you're a bicyclist, and you also do Kung Fu, you're a black belt, you happen to be on Adderall because you are diagnosed ADHD, you eat OMAD, you only do 1 meal a day, you're not ketogenic, but you want to grow up to be that when you're older, right? You're in a relationship, you are a little bit dissatisfied with your, this aspect of your physical performance, but you love the fact that you've got great endurance, but you don't like the fact that you don't have any intensity. Here's kind of things. You've decided to go vegetarian for the next 6 months. All of these factors come in. And then when you're done giving us this kind of medical intake data, deep data, you can slide these sliders. You can say, hey, I want to be more focused, or I want to be more intimate. I want to be, right? I want to have more energy, or I want to have more chill. And you can adjust these sliders, and it's kind of like adjusting a VU meter on a stereo system and saying, I want more bass, or I want more treble, or I want more mid-range. And then at the end of it, you can tell us, you can literally write us an article. You can write 2,000 pages. We don't care. We want to know it all. And we have these incredible things that people share with us. Because we've had drug addicts come to us and have left, have after months have gone, thank you so much. I no longer feel like meth is my buddy. I'm now really good friends with Focus Savagery and Nectar X. And so you're able to not only have our analysis tell you what's going on, but you're also able to intimately tell us exactly what you'd want to accomplish, and even more intimately tell us, hey, I didn't want to say this because I was afraid that you'd tell my mom, but this is where I'm at in life, and this is what I need, and I'm really hoping you can help us. I just got a text today from somebody who has a disc problem, and they're going, is there any way to help repair the myelin sheath on the disc, because I'm in excruciating pain. I wake up in it and I want to get off, right, NSAIDs, and I want to get off painkillers and things. And I've got a huge heart for people that have been on painkillers, and I just happen to be deeply working on that product right now. So watch for that. Watch for that coming.
Beautiful. And I love that. So, not only are you sort of, subjectively choosing different things that you want to work on, but based on the story that you share throughout the process of setting up your Nootopia kit, you're actually then feeding a system that's far more intelligent than we could realize. And this is one of the beauties of AI, right? I think we're all a little scared of the potential of it, because when it can do really, really cool stuff, it means it can also do really scary stuff at the same time. But that's super cool that, when you're starting to say that you're a triathlete or you eat a high fat diet, you're also getting fed information based on, again, hundreds of thousands of other people that have put that in. And so the algorithms and the AI is actually helping you along, and you're actually getting an even more accurate assessment of yourself than you're able to do alone with the sliding scales. I love that. And I don't think that, at this point, as we've kind of teased what Nootopia is up to here, I don't think it's a question, but I am curious what issues you may have with some of the other nootropic products on the market. And of course, I think the customization is just a game changer. And I want to know how you guys really do that, because it just seems so wild that it seems like such a complicated, I'm a business owner. It seems like a very complicated task. And I know you've got the AI, so that's amazing. But I do want to dive into that some more. But Mark, before we do you have any issues with any particular ingredients or anything that we can sort of discuss as it relates to some of the other nootropics out there? Because I know I've tried a lot, and a lot of them don't make me feel fantastic. But is there anything specific that you could add there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to throw any of the people that have helped to make nootropics to get it into the vernacular of today, because I think that we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So starting with that, one of the things I've been really careful of is a couple things. One is there are brute force ways to accomplish certain outcomes, and but as we like to say, eventually you're going to have to write the check for that. You're going to pay the price in either, it could be, something as quote unquote simple as liver toxicity to as something as complex as causing some neurological damage long term. And so it's really important, I think, to understand that there's a thing called minimum viable dose. That if you think about like what if I was going to put a compound, whether it was a completely natural, organic, extracted compound in my body, or it was a lab-derived, chemically derived compound, what I want to do is I want to say, okay, what's the very minimum I can put in my system to get a result? And then is there a way, this is super important, man. Are you with me, Joe?
I'm with you.
We're super all right. I love it.
There's a slight delay in the audio, but I'm with you, Mark.
Pregnant pause. I love looking at you because you beam happiness and love and light and kindness, and it's so great to be able to have that on the other side of the Riverside screen here.
Thank you.
So going in
Thank
with
so
minimum
much,
viable dose, right? Come on, man, you're the man. So when you go in with minimum viable dose, is there a way, right? You ask yourself the question: is there a way to make this minimum viable dose act like optimum dose? Like, is there a way to make it so that it can help me go from this sick to suboptimal to optimal, and maybe even super optimal? Or if I'm already at optimal, can it make me go from super optimal to superhuman? Like, is there something that can help me get to those, ranges? Keeping in mind that it's not just the pill, it's the process, right? Like, you don't take the clear pill and you don't become Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper, in fact, in the what is it called? The directors or the
Limitless,
there was a show that was on NPR where this bearded guy who taught acting, right? I'm trying to remember the name of it. But he would. This is why I need a producer, man. Where's my Jamie? Where's my Jamie when I need him?
Yeah.
But he said and I think it was the 15 years or whatever that he had the show where he did interviews with famous people, famous actors, he said he had one graduate in 15 years. He had one graduate of his class that became a world-class actor, and it was Bradley Cooper. Okay, so you and I taking the clear pill are not going to bring us to Bradley Cooper land. I love the idea. I think it's a really neat concept. I would love to have the pill that allows you to sit on the couch and to get ripped abs and to write the great American novel and to just be the super performer and to day trade. So, and that's why this is not a clear pill, but it does have some clear stuff to it, right? Right. You've got to apply yourself. You have to apply yourself. You have to get the mindset of, my goal is to do X, and I'm going to feed myself with the components that give me X, and I'm going to use the minimum viable dose, but I'm going to do a thing called potentiation. And what that means, Joe, is that I'm going to systematically get rid of each of the blocks that keeps me from performing at this super level, right? This superhuman level. So the way that we did this, and this is the long answer to are there nootropics you're scared of, or things that you don't like, or things that you think are crap, or things that you think are abusive or not good for people? And yeah, there's a ton. But the bottom line is, I trust people to be smart. I trust people to make good decisions for themselves. I will lean heavy into technologies that give me performance, and I will try them out deeply. And I've got a huge core of associates who are in the biohacker universe, right? Who are willing to go venture out on the edge of the cliff and say, we're going to try this, and we're going to give feedback and say, does this work? Or does this seem toxic? Or does this, So, but within the context of this, you can take a very micro dose of something. I think people are discovering that in psilocybin and right in the ayahuasca performance and in microdosing of mushrooms and those things, that it's not necessarily the mega trip that gets them the performance they want. Sometimes it's just the light awakening of the right brain cells at the right time with the right activities that are going to get me a quantum leap in performance and an aha moment, that breakthrough going, oh, that stupid negative thinking that I've been holding on to all my life, or that thing my mom did to me when I was 10 and I'm still carrying it around with me at 60, right? Instead, they go, poof, it's gone, because that little tiny tickling of the right neurotransmitters and a new neural pathway saying, hey, that's not serving me anymore. Let me go, right? Take another path. And that's what this kind of potentiation can do by saying, I've got this neurochemical cocktail that is a small amount of really precision nutrients and supplements and extracts and components. And then I'm going to get rid of all the stuff. I'm going to get a super antioxidant, right? So I don't have oxidative stress that's fighting me. I'm going to get an adaptogen so that instead of having this adrenal rush and a serotonin you're used up trying to keep your heart from pumping out of your chest, instead I'm going to have adrenal management, right? And suddenly I'm restoring my adrenal flow, and I'm balancing out my serotonin in my gut, so that through the gut-brain axis, right, the vagus nerve, we're getting this nice balance of serotonin in the brain and serotonin in the gut, and suddenly we're starting to feel good. I'm going to have a choline donor, right? I'm going to have a source of choline, so that as my brain is starting to clock with this nootropic, it's starting to work faster and faster, and it's starting to think better and with more pathways, right? It's not a 10% of your brain lit up. It's your brain's 100% of your brain works, right? It's just what parts work at what time, doing what activity and what memories, or what am I trying to accomplish? And so when that starts happening, you start using up calories in the brain. We start doing that. You need something to flow in additional choline so you don't use it all up and go, all right, that was fun for 20 minutes or whatever. And then you might need a little bit of a stimulant, a little bit of a thing to kind of like when that conversion, there's an enzymatic activity that happens in the brain that starts converting these neurochemical precursors into the neurochemicals that your brain needs to go play with. And when that happens, it gets a little bit of it's like, you know, your engine, right, is going, oh, maybe I need to fuel up. And so you fill up a little bit, you get a little bit of an energy bump for a second, and then all the enzymatic action can happen in the background. And then when that energy falls off, you get a new ATP level energy, right? You get the mitochondrial energy out and your brain starts boom. And you feel it. You definitely feel, as you probably know, 20 to 40 minutes, or depending on what you're taking, or like when I'm doing Xamarin, right? A minute later, I'm going, all right, I'm in that zone. All right.
Right. Yeah, it makes so much sense, and it's it kind of is a testament to the patience and the sophistication of Nootopia. And when you were speaking, I was thinking about both in the brain space with I think it's Dale Bresden's book, The End of Alzheimer's, and in this, and let me tell you another quick side story that was kind of funny this summer. Is I had a woman who had severe vitamin D deficiency. And we put her on vitamin D, and she got more sun, and then she went on vacation, and her vitamin D was optimized. And she says, I wish I knew if it was the supplements or the sun. And so we're conditioned in the sort of conventional medical paradigm that there's just one thing we got to do. And if we look at when you were talking, I was also thinking about Ambien. There's this huge number of like military, both veterans and active duty, that are taking Ambien. And it's like that sledgehammer you're talking about, that massive, it's not that minimum effective dose, it's that sledgehammer to the brain, right. That, of course, puts you to sleep, but at what cost? And, when we look at Dale Bresden's Alzheimer's quote cure, there's 20 things you got to do, because you got to turn this down, you got to turn that up, you got to move this, you got to move your body. And I think we're conditioned to always look for one thing, but that's sort of the genius behind some of these products. I took Brain Flow before we bopped on, and I can tell there's 10 different things happening inside these pills. And so I think that's super beautiful. And the last thing I'll just tack on is I think we're also the sort of consumer in us these days. We're so susceptible to marketing, and that gets back to the phone addiction. But we're so susceptible to marketing that sometimes we don't know the difference between, say, clean brain energy and excessive, or that sledgehammer approach, because we just spent money. We want to feel it quick, and we want to feel it come on. And sometimes we're so just sort of addicted to feeling different than we used to, or than we did half an hour ago, that we lose calibration on, is this good or not? And so I think that's also been my experience with some of the nootropics I've tried over the years.
Yeah, that's such a great insight, Joe. In fact, it's kind of interesting you say that. I'm in downtown Burlington, Iowa. This is where my lab, as you can see here, this is we got 3 levels of laboratory, podcast space, and the rest. We're getting the podcast space ready. So next time I see you, there'll be a massive Nootopia logo behind me and some other cool stuff. We're going all Rogan, bro. We're going
Beautiful.
Rogan. It's like going rogue, except
Amazing.
with
Jamie.
But I think
that's right.
I think, so anytime you're in I don't care what town in America you're in, and I'm right downtown. I'm right in the most active district in this downtown town of about 30,000, right on the Mississippi. Whenever you're in a town, there's going to be these, these activities that are like the people that are just barely at survival level, just trying to keep alive, right? And here I am talking about, and you and I, you just very well talked about this kind of performance desire that we have in the consumer culture of, give me something that's a baseball bat, even if what I really need is like a ball peen hammer, right? And so we get so I pick up the flash, right? Well, I just noticed right on the windowsill on the other side of my building here is a heroin needle, and I'm going, oh my God, how like
wow,
appropriately inappropriate that is. Like, and people want, if you've ever grown up with, like I know, right? So I had
the heroin needle's on the outside of the building, right?
It is on the outside, my friend. It is on the outside. Yeah. We don't let. We're not real. We're not real fond of that in Nootopia Labs. I can't wait to tell you we're actually Chastity and I are looking at renaming Nootopia Labs, but I got to run it by Matt. But I think you'll get it. But so when I was 10 years old, not even 10. I was actually 9. I had this older sister who she was really pretty and very super smart and very funny. And she was a few years older than me. She was 13 at the time. I guess I was 8. She was 13 at the time. And she would walk by the high school on the way to the junior high. And eventually the high school guys, it was during the late 60s. I mean, she went to Woodstock, but she ended up, kind of going down that route of heroin and associated drugs, and eventually became a heroin addict. And I love my sister. She's an incredible woman. And she's got this great, her daughter is a beautiful, beautiful work of art as well. But it was my experience. I remember going in one time to, she said, "Hey, Mark, I need your help." And we went into her bedroom and she closed the door and she said, "I need you to watch the door in case mom and dad come in." And then I saw her wrap a hose around her arm,
wow,
slap it, and do the needle. And we were listening to Neil Young, Needle and the Damage Done, like literally the Neil Young Harvest album at the same time. I mean, you want to tie these kind of disparate, wild things when you're of your youth together. That's it. And then I saw her eyes roll back in her head, and I saw her fall back on the bed, and then she was just gone. I mean, there was no connection to the outside world at that point. And it's that instantaneous, like it was really, kind of freaky for me, but that's that instantaneous results that we want. We're so used to this, right? Right. Cause effect,
yeah.
Right? Can't sleep, Xanax. Right? Anxiety, Xanax.
I worked out once. I still have belly fat. What the hell?
You too? Dude, I'm doing 100% fat diet. How come I look like a slug?
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
So it's that instantaneous. And I think it's really important also in it that just like the nootropics, or I'm going to do one level above nootropics. How about optimum performance? In optimum performance, if you look at your life, right, you look at mind, body, energy, sex, and sleep, right? You start looking at those facets and you go, okay, I know for a fact, as working with addicts and working in this industry, that if I can help you think clearer, you're going to start making better decisions, because clarity of thought leads to better decision making. Because you go, oh, that's not, if I run really hard into this window, I'm not going to probably get through to my car on the other side, right? That's a dumb decision. But if your head's messed up, you might make that. You might, that might be, or if you're really, really high, you might make that kind of decision making, right? So if I can help you get some clarity, some mental clarity by optimizing that orchestra of different neurochemicals, then you're going to make some better decisions. And then if I can give you the tools and the combination of elements that are going to give you the energy to execute on those decisions, you might, perchance, create some success in your life. And if you do a few of those things, they have a tendency to kind of scale pretty quickly. You do 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 successful things, your confidence goes up, your confidence in making better decision goes up, your confidence in executing and believing that what you're doing is going to give you an outcome that is worthwhile, not just to you, but to other people. You can quit focusing on your own self and start focusing on other people and on supporting and helping and fostering, right? And encouraging other people, because you're not stuck in this, woe is me. I make these crappy decisions. I get these crappy results. The world hates me. I suck. And instead, your self-talk aligns with the reality that you're creating of getting your head clear, getting the motivation and the energy to execute on that clear-headed decision-making, getting those incremental successes that lead to the cumulative success. And then suddenly you're going, holy crap, I don't even have to think about myself. I am self-supporting. I don't have the amount of energy I have to use to support my own actions to lead me to having a successful and a rewarding and a loving and an encouraging life is a fraction of what I have available to me because I'm making these big decisions. So now what do I want to do? Well, I can go focus on other people. I can go encourage my employees. I can go find the genius in this person that thought that they were broken and they were never going to be worth anything. I can go take the person that's already successful and provide another avenue for them or another piece of the puzzle that they've been looking for. You know, the guy that introduced me to Matt Gallant is a guy named Brad Costanzo. And Brad's an incredible human being. And he introduced us accidentally. He was just a customer of mine who was a fervent evangelist for what we do, opening a box of my Noots, the Web Nutrients Noots, pouring them out, and Matt saw them, and that led to this whole incredible relationship that I've got with Matt Wade, Andy, and the whole team that make up Bioptimizers and Nootopia. And that happened because the guy was committed to his own scaling progress in life. And Brad is one of those people that if you know him, he is all about helping other people succeed and helping you recognize those blocks, those little tiny blocks or those huge blocks, those blind spots, that if those were eliminated, your ability to accelerate through life is greatly amplified. I know the Runga Bro, I know that you have that same major component in your life where regardless of the challenges you've faced, regardless of the TBIs that you may have been subjected to, you found a way to take your own life journey and turn it into an instrument for other people to thrive. And that's what we're here for. And that's what nootropics do for me. I think they do that for you as well.
I love that, Mark. And it's so beautiful, just this idea of, and I don't think a lot of people have thought about it this way, taking nootropics to get out of your own head. So as you're describing what's basically the healthy user bias, and as I make an informed or a more clear or a more decisive decision, well, that snowballs and enables me to make more decisions. And all of a sudden, even organically, if I forget to take my, brain flow tomorrow, well, I'm still getting some residual confidence from that really great decision I made yesterday. And so as that sort of snowballs and you start to sort of probably be more successful or have more confidence in yourself, in your decisions, then all of a sudden you're higher up on that hierarchy of human needs and you can start contributing elsewhere. So this podcast is really getting people to put some more confidence in their intuition. And intuition to me comes from the heart. And here we are talking about nootropics. And so that's the relationship. And I think it's really beautiful that most of the time when our brain is scattered and distracted, we are actually also ironically using more mental brain power because we're overthinking all of the decisions we're making. And the more we think about things sometimes, the worse decision we make. So having that clarity of thought all of a sudden might actually be the thing that puts you more into your heart, which is where magic happens. So, I mean, that's a beautiful way to think about this, and why it's so important to kind of invest in our own minds, because otherwise it's not a very it can be an enemy as much as it can be a friend.
Well, it's so funny. You mentioned Maslow, which such a powerful, right? If you know his story and that led to the hierarchy of needs, So when my former wife committed suicide, right, and that's kind of what led me into nootropics, is about 6 months after that, my youngest daughter, who works for me now, she's our special ops. She runs special ops for Nootopia. So Livy,
Navy
I
SEAL.
handed her. Yeah, she is, man. She's more like this. She's one of those seals. She's great. She's absolutely one of my closest friends and confidants. She's great. I handed her. She came home from school one day. I actually have a video of her walking up the driveway to the house and kind of walking and kind of like that. Kids nowadays, they have these huge backpacks with 20 books in them, and she's walking up the house and she's kind of, you can tell that she's kind of like, I'm just going through the motions. I'm repeating every day. And she actually told me that's how she felt when during her mom's last years. And I handed her Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Man's search for meaning. And she read it through it. She just like blazed through it through the whole weekend. And on Monday, she wrote like a 2,000 word post on Facebook saying, you have to read this. This is where life is at. We're first world problems at best, and she just got the gestalt of what Maslow was trying to say. But one of the interesting things that I just reflected on as you were sharing with me that component is, if you look at the hierarchy of needs, he's got it in a pyramid, doesn't he? Right?
Yep.
So, and he's got it right from survival to self-actualization. And
Exactly.
What's interesting is survival, it's on a pyramid. It takes up the most real estate on that pyramid. Self-actualization is a tiny little piece of the top. And as you so well stated, this survival takes so much energy, so much constant, thought, so much, you're constantly waiting for the tigers to attack, for the bill collector to come, for all of this stuff that's attacking you to show up. And you don't have a lot of time. I mean, it's hard to go from being in deprived mode of having a hungry stomach and being concerned about every 5 minutes of your day to going, I think I'm going to go and self-actualize. I think I'm going to go into my spiritual realm, right? Kind of hard. I want to go to spiritual realm, but my stomach is doing my mantra. So I think it's really a powerful thought to think, wow, if we could get out of our survival mode mentally, because we're making those good decisions, we're executing on those decisions, we're getting clear, right? And we're also, the other part of that I think is super important, because people think of these things as work. They think of like, oh my God, well, this is work, like discipline is work, and right, like, and just eating this certain diet and doing waiting 15 hours or 20 hours or 22 hours or 23 hours of fasting to get my 1 hour of feeding window, or doing my meditation for 20 minutes twice a day, or whatever it is, or focusing for 2 hours on this project I've got to finish. And if you put it into the discipline, you're going to eventually fail, because you're eventually going to go weak. You're going to have a bad day. You're going to be tired because you didn't sleep, whatever. But when you start operating at a higher level, but what I mean by that is that you're cognitively firing on all cylinders. You're energized, because not just the stuff you take, not just the nootropics or whatever, coffee you drink, but the sleep you got, right? The incredible quality of sleep you had the night before, the exercise you did that restored your body and did those things, the clean water you drank and those things, then you suddenly find yourself not working at stuff, you're playing at stuff. And when you start playing at life, this goes back to this, I think I mentioned Stephen Kotler earlier, talking about flow state, right? Is when you start getting into flow state, you are much closer to that self-realization, spiritual experience than you are to survival. Even if you are economically or physically in survival mode, going to that neurological mode of flow or of joy or of happiness or of commitment, right? Or of engagement suddenly pulls you up like really quickly. It goes, you start going up this hierarchy of needs pyramid, and suddenly you find yourself kind of casually resting at the top going, oh, that wasn't work. That was fun. Let's do it again. Yeah.
I'm going to share a quick story from, so a couple of weeks ago, we were in my kitchen. It was my son's birthday, and somebody brought up Maslow in the hierarchy of human needs. And it's funny how our brain just assumes, or we are so accustomed to, say, fight or flight and mental judgment and some of that, sort of extraneous brain energy that we end up wasting that circles around and hits us in the back because it's just worry and anxiety and not being in that flow state. And it's interesting because my wife teaches mindfulness and yoga, and she butted in and she said, Maslow at the end of his life was questioning if he got the order right. And we were like, what? What are you saying? And when we look at, some of these countries, some of the poorest countries in Africa, as an example, rate the highest on happiness and life satisfaction scales, right? And so what she was sharing was that Maslow said, love and belonging could just as easily be at the bottom, even if you don't have that safety and that financial security and that, shelter. There's countries around the world where they literally don't have water, but they rate high on happiness because they're loved and they have a purpose in life. And so it's so interesting that also getting people out of fight or flight, regardless of, their financial stress and things like that, is also the path. And it's interesting that at that point, it's sort of self-manifesting as well, where there's this ironic thing where if, we're super stressed and we're super worried about finances and things like that, we can't escape it. But ironically, it's like if we start actualizing, we start doing good deeds, and we start helping others, then it's all of a sudden it ends up. It's an interesting puzzle, Mark.
I totally agree. My brother is a missionary down in Nicaragua and has been for 20 something years now. He fell in love with it by he was part of a Southern California church and went to Mexico to just do some work with some kids and fell in love with the kids. And my brother and I were both, when we were young, we said, I don't know if we were ever going to have kids. We're very close. I've got two brothers, Tom and Doug. Doug is the one that's a missionary. Tom is this incredible talent up in Vancouver, Washington. But he, I see him. He's posting on Facebook regularly and those things, and I see him. He's in Nicaragua, right? So he's in a foreign country. He's a typical Portland, Oregon white boy in Nicaragua. He and his wife Julie, and they live in this little town. They have to actually park their car in their living room every night, their truck in their living room, because it might be, the wheels and tires might be taken off it the next morning, or the engine taken out of it by some scavengers, because they're in a they're in a second third world country, right? And yet he said, and I see him in the kids that he teaches and works with, which they might total 50 in a class. And you just see these kids thriving in love, right? Thriving in love, right, regardless of the fact that they're not thriving in physical amenities. And, they wear a uniform because they don't have enough money for a lot of diverse clothing, maybe. Right? They might be getting hand-me-downs from they're flown in and dropped over. It's crazy. And it was this amazing thing. I asked my brother, I said, what are some of the most meaningful things you've done in recent years? And he goes, I got to do this really cool thing, Mark. He goes, I would go to the docks, because Nicaragua, is one of those countries, right, where you've got a lot of trade traffic on either side, and you've got Panama above and the rest. And so he goes, yeah, and he goes, I would go to the dock and I would ask the mariners if I could have do they have any extra cable? Like the big, huge cabling that they use to anchor a huge cargo ship to the dock. And they, you know, they would have like some frayed cabling or whatever, and they would give it to him, and he'd put it in his truck, and his truck would drive like this, and he would drive home, and he would collect that stuff, and then he would go to one little town of maybe, 500 people or 300 people, and then there'd be a big ravine that would fill up during the flood season, during the monsoon season, and they couldn't traverse to the other town of 200 people across the way, but they had trade normally going on, and my brother would literally get both of the towns to get together and stretch this cable across, and he created bridges between two economic impoverished towns to make one unified, not so impoverished group of people. And it was such a beautiful metaphor of crossing the chasm and creating a bridge to help people succeed by unifying them. They didn't have, neither of those had any more money than before, but they could exchange things of value with each other and create more of a harmonious dialogue and relationship all year long, instead of only when the monsoons were gone, and and then they had to wait for it to dry up, and then they had to go down this ravine and up a ravine. And I mean, how cool is that, right?
I mean, the metaphor of the two hemispheres of our brain when we're in fight or flight, and when we look at binaural beats as an example, getting the two hemispheres of the brain to speak to each other, the metaphor there is pretty amazing, because wow, it's sort of that, like, there's a couple of documentaries on Gaia that's sort of looking, has you look at the population of the world like we're all a cell and the world is the organism, right? And so when I heard that story, I was just like, oh my gosh, that's what we're talking about here in terms of brain health. It's connecting the hemispheres of the brain and unifying our consciousness so that we can achieve so much more than we would have, allowing those two societies or whatever the civil gosh, the word is escaping me, but small towns to thrive. Yeah. Wow.
And think about it. I mean, he was a scavenger, so he went and scavenged, right? This is exactly what the cell would do. He went and scavenged this thing, right? This coil, this DNA, this, right? And he brought it to one of the towns. He brought it to, and he coordinated with the other town and said, let's get this rope all the way, let's get this cable all the way over, and then let's build planks on it. And they did it. He said that the joy that he saw as these people engaged in an activity, because remember, these are poor people. Like, you are either just hanging out, trying to figure out how to eat each day, or maybe you unify yourselves in this activity that brings you closer and closer, like physically, spiritually, mentally, closer and closer and closer together until, boom, you're unified. And now you've created this super organism, right? The two cells are now connected. They were divided. They're now connected, right? Independent, they were weak. Unified, they're strong. The thing is held together with cable, with the same kind of cable that would hold a ship to a dock, that's full of thousands of containers. I mean, just, yeah. And by the way, that's my brother is the most badass guy you'll ever meet. He is Forrest Gump, by the way. Someday we'll have that conversation. He's literally Forrest Gump, except better. I mean, he's a smarter Forrest Gump.
I love that. And the metaphor continues. I just, I've been trying to think about how to, and this is another, and I'd be curious on your thoughts on this, Mark, but in terms of optimizing brain function, for me, I'm starting to look at, I bought a drum, right? I bought a drum. I'm going to try to learn how to play this, this handpan drum.
Love it.
My wife's Icelandic. So the metaphor of, the cells or the people, being engaged with building that bridge and unifying the civilization or the town or the community, how else can we use our brain to support broader function? Is learning a language the best thing we can do for our brain? Is painting? Is learning an instrument? What are some other activities we can invest our time in terms of optimizing or maximizing even the results we get from Nootopia?
That's such a great question, Joe. I think from, the first thing that comes up, by the way, I did what did he call it? The lightning round last night on the podcast I did last night. Who did I do? Who was the podcast last night? No. It's so funny. I've been on the round, man. But here's the deal. What I am, and tell me if you agree with this. One of the biggest roadblocks that keep us from performing in life is fear. It was Carrie Jack and the Happy Household podcast. Okay. So, and he was hitting me with the lightning round, and he's going right. And Kerry Jack's a fantastic guy. If you don't know him, he's definitely a friend of the family. So did I just pimp a podcast on your podcast?
Hey, that's all. Hey, rising tide lifts all boats.
Great guy. You would love him. He's one of us. He's definitely one of us.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
There you go. He's got the hat and everything on.
Love it. Yeah. So the thing is I grew up, I spent so much of my life in fear. Even when I was succeeding, I was always fearful that that the bottom was going to fall out, or that the other shoe was going to drop, or that it couldn't last. Right.
Right.
Because I don't have the street cred. I don't have the credentials to back up the kind of activities that I do. I've got really, really good friends, and even sometimes just people that I meet and get to spend, lucky time with, who are incredible minds and, bio and neurochemists. I mean, this is me. This is my chemistry, right? Is it? That's my chemistry set from when I was 6 years old. And so, but when you operate from fear, there are so many depressive neurochemical and negative neurochemical events happening that pull us away from our potential and the opportunities that surround us. And when we use our neurochemistry to combat fear, and one of the first things that when I developed NectarX, one of the things I built into NectarX was a fear abatement molecular combination, meaning I built it for me and for people at the time that were addicts and things to be able to reduce fear by increasing confidence and increasing the lateral thinking between the left and right hemispheres, as you were speaking earlier, so that I could, again, feel more confident in the decision-making I had. Because part of fear is you don't think that you're going to make a good decision because you made some decisions that weren't good, that led you to a negative outcome, or what was perceived as a negative outcome, right? Sometimes it's more our perception than the reality. That thing didn't happen, so I suck. Instead of, that thing didn't happen, what a blessing. Now I get to go do the other thing that I wanted to do, but I was afraid to do because everybody thought it was dumb, but it's what I really wanted to do. Those kinds of, you get all these myriad of processes. And I think that fear abatement in a positive way, meaning not just quelling fear, not just saying, okay, I'm gonna work really hard not to feel the fear. I'm talking about moving above fear by putting yourself in a higher operating state, so that the things that would normally terrorize us or make us freeze or make us feel unconfident, we bring ourselves to a level where we go, you know what? I think I can do this. It's, if you've ever done, like when I was a tennis player, when I was competitive tennis, I was often, when I started, everybody I was playing was better than me. But what happened was I started getting in the mindset of being a better player. I'm a better player. I'm a better player. I'm a better player than I think I am. I'm a better player than what I believe I'm possible. And I'm going to model the best of the best mentally so that I perform as a great player physically. And it happened. I'm not talking about fake it till you make it, although there's a little bit of that kind of putting yourself into state, if you understand that meaning. right? Like putting yourself in a higher operating state so that you can operate at a higher operating state, so that you perform at a better operating state, so you suddenly are thinking at a better operating state. They are self-reinforcing. If I start thinking better and I start acting better, like I believe that my thinking process is accurate, then I go act on an accurate or optimistic or positive or loving or kind or committed state, right? That brings me naturally to a higher operating mental state, which brings me to a higher physical operating state. And suddenly I'm doing things I never thought possible, or I didn't know I was capable of, or that are so much more satisfying than that internal struggle I might have that says, oh, I know you want to do that, but you're not capable, or you don't have the degree, or you don't have the background, or you don't have, right, or you don't know the right people to get that job, or you don't know the right ins to become that actor, or you don't have, you know what I mean? Like here's the deal. I think I got it, Joe. I think I got it. Are you ready? How much of our lives
I'm ready.
do we? Are you ready, bro? Let's do this. Is how much of our lives do we spend looking for permission instead of carving a pathway that is the one that is our path? How often are we looking for that? I was a radical Jesus freak at one moment. And by the way, I don't, that's a loving, endearing term to me. When I say I was a Jesus freak, I was one of those guys that you came to when you had problems and you wanted a spiritual insight, or when you were trying to figure out what the word "the" meant in Latin, Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic, in this one obscure passage that nobody cared about. I was that guy. So I say it in love, not in it's not disparagement at all. And when you're trying to resolve your place in the world, a lot of people are waiting for the answer to come to them, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Patience and understanding and just being able to back off for a second or a minute or an hour or a day or a week, whatever, to be able to kind of get your spiritual thoughts together or your ideological thoughts together, or look for the things that are coming in, or to whether it's, or to kind of go, I wonder if X, Y, and answer those questions for yourself. Those are good things to do. But sometimes we spend a lot of time waiting instead of doing, because we're afraid of the fact that we might not succeed. And instead, I would challenge everyone to risk going out and doing the crazy thing that might be embarrassing 15 minutes later. But like a good friend of mine said, I'm sure there's a famous quote somewhere. It's like stupid decisions lead to great stories. And I'm not saying you're stupid decisions, right? But there are things that are crazy that just might work. And if they do, booyah, right? If they don't, they might lead you to the thing. Dude, this is my 19th company. Do you know how many failures within the context of those 19 companies I've had? I mean, within marketing, within sales, within product development, within management, within hiring, any of those. I've had a bazillion of those in my life that came from the fact that I didn't have a choice, but I had to go do something. And by just doing it and failing a little bit led to meeting a genius person like a Matt Gallant, who is absolutely one of the best strategists and marketing guys I've ever met, with one of the biggest hearts and a love for people that envelops a much bigger scope than I was able to envision for myself. And Wade, who has such a desire for teaching and bringing people along, like literally ushering people into their greatest success. These guys, it's incredible. And by the way, before I met these guys, I had 4 guys come to me. When I say guys, I mean 4 companies come to me and say, we want to buy your company. We think you're in a really cool space. We think it's really cool what you're doing. And after I dug beneath the surface a little bit, I found that these guys didn't have the heart. They didn't have longevity in mind. They had short-termers disease. And they weren't passionate about changing the world. They were passionate about making a buck. And I absolutely understand that. I honor that. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying it wasn't the thing that was the right decision for me. And it's hard to turn down big money, but it's easy to accept people that are committed and have proven themselves and are willing to stand behind their decisions and who lead with love, care, understanding, and then they perform to show that this isn't just, right? Not just words.
Right.
So, sorry.
Right on. And I completely agree with the sentiments around Wade and Matt, just amazing people. I've had the privilege of working with Bioptimizers for quite a few years now, which is beautiful. And there's a lot to unpack there. And I think, Mark, where you started was, how we deal with adversity. And the fake it till you make it piece is really interesting to me, because I think there's this, I think Einstein, said you can't repair a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it, right? So in other words, if you would normally be scared stepping out onto the tennis court, then you better not be you when you go out onto the tennis court anymore, because you've got to break that cycle. And then, once you get out of your own way, then goodness, as we discussed earlier in the show, can sort of snowball and you can now become this whole new person. And I love this. I love this idea I took from Joe Dispenza, that you're under no obligation to be who you were yesterday. And I'll share another quick story. My career really started working with athletes in tennis and baseball, and ended up going really deep into baseball and then stumbled into professional runners. And that's where I spent the better part of the last 10 years. But really interesting, these high school kids, I had 2 kids. One's name was Pete, one's name was Connor. And Connor always beat Pete in the run, right? So we would run just like first baseline sprints, right? Yep. And Pete would always come in a few paces behind Connor. And so that became the conditioning in Pete's mind. Well, when you've got kids that are going through puberty and, growing, it's like there can be big shifts quickly, but that learned helplessness. And I think it gets into how we deal with adversity, and do we fear it or do we feel it? And it gets back to the Maslow stuff. And I know companies, you alluded to so much there. I have so much running through my mind right now, but like 3M as an example, right? The Post-it notes, they were trying to make a sticker that lasted forever. And so if they were in fear, then they would have said, wow, this is the worst one we've ever created. But they were not. They were not in fear. They were in their feelings. And they said, wow, this is pretty useful. Maybe we should pivot and create this. And so I love those stories. But back to Connor and Pete. Pete would always lose by a step or two. And so one day, we were out there and I said to Connor between reps, I was like, hey, I want you to run at about 80% and make sure Pete wins. And wouldn't you know it, Connor runs at 80% and Pete won't win. Pete's still 2 paces back. Well, Pete thinks we're running all out. And so for me, it was this electrifying, and I get a chill right now. It was just such an electrifying moment because I had a really serious chat with Pete, and Pete went from the slowest guy in the top. He's obviously a privileged athlete. He's a very talented athlete. If he's working with me, he's probably got a scholarship already. But he went from worst to first, literally, and became the fastest kid on the team. And so it was an electrifying moment. But again, this learned helplessness, we learn our place in the world. Pete learned that he was always going to be slower than Connor, no matter how fast he got. And so we get into our own way. So anyways, I hope that comes full circle. And getting out onto the tennis court, if you believe that you're not a good tennis player and you're never going to catch up with the guys you're playing with, well, then you're right. So this breaking of consciousness and getting into our heart a little bit. And I guess I'll tack on one more thing, Mark. I see this at our Runga events where we bring in 50 people, and it's just such a nurturing, safe environment that people are really free to be themselves. And we hear this all the time that, wow, I can really just be myself here. And when we see how that translates, well, that 50-year-old executive that's barely left work in the past couple of years has no issue getting into an ice bath, has no issue swinging a kettlebell that's 30% of her body weight because she's out of fear. She feels safe and secure and nurtured. I mean, it's just so beautiful to see. And of course, across time, it's, everything from Runga to the 4-minute mile. We wouldn't see these things if we were in fear. So getting ourselves into our heart and our emotions and doing good in the world is ultimately the path. And sometimes I guess you got to fake it till you make it, right?
Can I share a quick story with you? And by the way, I ran a 4:36 mile in 8th grade or 7th grade, 8th grade.
Wow.
Wow. My brother ran a 4:30 or 4:28, I think. Yeah, I ran a 4:36. He ran a 4:28. So,
that's wild.
And he was my hero. So
wild.
We're going to go to grade school. So we're in grade school. My brother's a year older than me or a grade above me. And again, as I mentioned, he's my hero. He was born with no calcium in his legs. And his legs were pointed backwards. So, and he was born, he was slightly brain damaged because the doctor, he was born very early in the morning and the doctor wouldn't let the nurses deliver him. So he had to drive an hour to get to the hospital. And in that, he started starving of oxygen because the nurses were supposed to keep my mom's legs together so he couldn't escape. Yeah, really bad. So my brother grows up and we think and he just screams day and night. All he does is scream. Okay. And the doctors tell my parents you should just institutionalize him. That's where he would be best, and he'll be, because you've got other kids, you've got 3 daughters, and you've got this guy, and he's going to take, he's going to take everything you've got. So my parents did 2-hour shifts, sleeping every night, right? They would, one would sleep, and then the other would sleep, and the other would sit with my brother and take care of him. And again, he's just screaming and thrashing.
Wow.
That's all he does, scream and thrash. His feet are torn backwards. They eventually put, remember in Forrest Gump, those steel braces that they use, right, for legs.
Yeah.
So they eventually put steel braces on him, and they slowly started pointing his feet forward and getting him a high calcium diet at the time. That was the science, right? High calcium diet, right? And so
we're saying his feet were literally facing the other direction. Not just
facing the other direction.
Knees, but his feet were literally
facing the other direction. Yep. And because it was all cartilage, there was no calcium. They were just kind of like rubber legs, but they were pointed backwards. And if you tried to straighten them out fast, it would just be extreme pain, as you can imagine, as the nerves are trying to, and he's a baby, he's an infant. So let's fast forward to 6th grade. He's in 6th grade. I'm in 5th or 4th. I think I'm in 4th. And there's this guy comes to our grade school, and he's in, remember those dolphin shorts that runners wore back in the 70s? He's in,
sure.
They've got they're tight nylon shorts, right? You can tell if you're circumcised or not. And Richard Simmons 101. So this guy comes to our grade school and they have an assembly, where they get all the kids on the bleachers and in the basketball court, and he runs around the basketball court and he talks about form. He talks about running form. And he's a distance runner. And this is back in I guess it must be 1971, 72, something like that. And he's showing how you lean forward if you want to get a little bit more, right? And you bring your knee up, right? And you propel off your leg. And it was like this really interesting stuff. And I'm a little kid. I'm going, wow, this is really cool. And my big brother, who still has braces on his legs, and in crutches arrest is we look at this guy and he goes, oh, I really want to do that someday. And it was a guy named Steve Prefontaine. And Steve Prefontaine, if you know anything about coaching and running, was the first sponsored runner for Nike. And it was, at the time, it was Blue Ribbon Sports. It wasn't even Nike yet. And he was going from school to school to encourage people to run, and then selling shoes out of the back of his car for Phil Knight, and that became Nike and the rest. So that's kind of interesting. But so we get out of school and we walk.
Shoe Dog is
an
amazing book. Side note.
Oh my God, Shoe Dog. Yeah, incredible. Yeah. So we walk across we get right out of the gym and we're looking across, and there's a little league field right across the street. And my brother sees Little League and he goes, "Oh, that's what I want to do. I want to get in Little League, because in Little League you didn't have to run very far, right? And you could be a catcher, or you could be right, or you could play infield, and you could have it." And so my dad said, "Okay, if you're going to play ball, I'm going to play coach." And my dad had done some semi-pro ball when he was younger, and so he was pretty good at it. And so he said, "Okay, I'm going to coach, so he can keep an eye on my brother." And I joined T-ball, but I sucked so bad they didn't want me on the team. So I kept running. But my brother did that, and he was a catcher. And so being a catcher, he had to kneel down, right, and learn. And he started building up quads because he didn't have any muscles in his legs because he didn't have any, no muscle development because he's wearing. And it forced his feet, which were pigeon-toed at the time, to start separating and start getting parallel. And then eventually that led to him building up enough leg strength. He could learn how to sprint to first base. And then he tried some outfield, and he became, his Little League team became, one of they won the regionals for the Pacific Northwest. He ended up going back to Virginia, Washington, D.C. to play in the Nationals for that. A number of years later, he drugged me along in running, and he became one of the top 3 or 5 fastest cross-country runners in the state of Washington, and racing for Shadle Park High in Spokane, Washington, which I'm heading out there in the not too distant future to see Ben Greenfield and do a podcast with him. That'll be fun. And then
beautiful. Here's
a really fun part. So he's waking up at 4 a.m. He's making wood trusses at my uncle's wood truss plant, trusses that hold up roofs. And so he's banging trusses together with big steel plates with nails in them. He's going to Portland State University, the local state college in Portland. And he's driving there at 6 or 7 a.m. for his first class. And then he's playing soccer on the sidelines. And he gets picked up by the Timbers junior team to be a soccer player. So he plays semi-pro soccer for a year or two while he's going to college. And This is my brother. This is my brother who was supposed to be roadkill, was supposed to be institutionalized, and was going to be quote unquote retarded or mentally handicapped, and instead becomes a badass in every aspect. Runs a 4:28 mile, runs and becomes a top cross country candidate. Becomes one of the state's best baseball players, and then becomes plays semi-pro soccer, and I mean, this is. And
I hope you got a few shares of Nike along the way.
It was so funny. It was he started my first company with me. He was my accountant, and he gave me the garage to build my electronics in. I built lasers back then in the mid 1980s. And my company was bought by another company, and we became an Inc. 500 company. And in that process, the guy that bought my company didn't want to buy my brother. He already had an accountant, his wife. So they paid my brother, I think they paid him $10K to buy him out of the company at the time. My brother took that and immediately bought Apple stock. So let's try this. Kid grows up with a supposed mental handicap, with braces on his legs, said he was never going to be anything.
He's literally Forrest Gump.
He is freaking Forrest Gump. He buys Apple stock in 87, I think it was, 86 or 87, buys Apple stock, right? And now he's a missionary in Nicaragua. So you can't tell me that the shit that you're going through is too tough. I've got a brother that I got to watch every day, right, compete for his life. He would come home from Little League. I was the geeky kid doing science experiments in our bedroom. I shared it with my two brothers. And so I'm doing vacuum extraction technology. I'm doing high voltage. I'm doing lasers. I'm doing all this stuff. And my brother would come home from Little League. He would quietly walk in the front door, walk around to our bedroom, close the door, and bawl his eyes out because he was in so much pain because of his legs going through the torture of him having to catch. But he was not going to give up the dream of performing something athletic because some weird guy from University of Oregon named Steve Prefontaine came and ran at our grade school.
Wow.
Motivation.
I mean, that is a powerful, if that doesn't motivate you, I don't know what will. And it's, gosh. And the fact that, not only did he achieve all that, but, even the story of Nike, which, along the way there, that book, Shoe Dog, I remember reading it, and immediately when I was about halfway through it, going on my website and feeling just so proud of myself because Nike started from such humble beginnings, made every mistake in the book, and that book is just so sort of honest. You would think that, Phil Knight, would try to maybe, rewrite the script a little bit. Oh, I wasn't, I didn't do that. And, so gosh, those two stories together, the story of your brother is just absolutely incredible. Being born that way and running a 4:36 or whatever you had said. I mean, I've never run a mile that quick, and I was born with, pretty decent legs. So
with real legs,
just beautiful. Yeah. Real legs. Beautiful story, Mark. And as we usually do when we connect, we're getting long here. So we gotta come to a close here, Mark, but what can we leave our listeners with here today? We've motivated the hell out of them. We've given them a lot of value and a lot of great information around the brain and reason to, try some new nootropics and step into the ring with Nootopia here. But is there anything we left out that you want to close with?
So aside of that, first, thanks so much, Joe. I so love and appreciate who you are and your mission and Runga. And I have nothing but I'm now having an opportunity to do a number of podcasts with a number of people, and I'm super fortunate to be doing this work. But I love the fact that we have this interconnected goal of seeing people thrive, and so it makes me I'm doubly happy that I get to work with you in this capacity. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me on and for sharing that. So number one is I hope people check out Runga, and I hope they have a chance to see what you're doing there. Two, I hope that there's an opportunity for people to see that regardless of their circumstance and regardless of their neurochemical makeup, regardless of the TBIs they've been subjected to and other challenges, that there is a path through it that is so much better than they would think. You don't have to get back to normal. You can go from sick to superhuman. And I firmly believe that everybody can do that. And, I think my brother's a great example of that, right? And I think both of us have had extremely challenging backgrounds, and we've not only survived, but we've thrived. I think thrivalness it's a really important characteristic to develop. And I'm really happy with the things that we've created to help people do that. Neurochemically, biologically, biochemically, spiritually, connectedly. And then lastly, and this is not a pitch, this is an encouragement. Dude, we got this stuff that we're about to launch that I'm super excited about. And here's why. It's not just, so this is College Genius. For those listeners who are just listening to this, we have this new thing that's coming out that's called College Genius that we developed at Nootopia Labs, and Chastity. The great Chastity is really the biochemical genius behind this. I would have made it into a capsule and put a pretty little top on it and put it in the test tube. And she said, no. Let's go make something that's chocolatey delicious. Here's the deal. For every two scoops is a 2 level scoops. The scoop you're watching is a level scoop is a little over 17 grams of product. That's the equivalent of 1.5, just short of 1.5 pounds of pure medicinal mushroom extract. So you're getting a hyper dose of in whenever I'm doing stuff with precision dosing, like we do with our other nootropics, it's minimum viable dose with potentiators and all the other stuff that make a stack really potent. With Collagenius, we threw caution to the wind and we said, what if I could hot rod your brain with a 4-layer mushroom extract that is both chocolatey delicious and is 1.5 pounds of mushrooms that your brain and body are going to just absorb, take advantage of, create neurogenesis, inspire BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and repair damaged brain cells and give you an adaptogen level that you haven't experienced in a long time. Incredible sleep. It's a great energizer. It works great with your coffee. At Wade's birthday recently, he turned 50 recently. He literally did a Japanese tea ceremony, and he made Collagenius hot chocolate as our tea. So
move over, matcha.
Yeah, move over. Hey, I'm using that. I'm going to steal that. Is that okay?
Yeah. Hey, it's yours. That's wonderful. And it's cool too, as we were talking earlier about, products or medications, pharmaceuticals that are more like a sledgehammer to the brain. The really cool thing when you get into these really natural substances like lion's mane and reishi mushroom that even have that adaptogenic effect, that's the type of thing you can throw just 1.5 pounds at and just, get it down into the coffee and enjoy the results, right? So it's one of those safe, natural compounds that
absolutely
you should
your body
top that tank off with.
Yes, your body just eats it up. In fact, it's really been interesting because we've been testing it for over almost a year now, but 9 months we've had this formulation of it, and we've been just incrementing it. Matt was really valuable in helping us to how do you bring out the chocolate notes and how do you get the dissolvability really high and how do you get it so that you've got every one of the neuro characteristics that we wanted so that people could really experience it. But it's become a staple. And I'm super excited as we get more and more down this pathway, is the more and more we get, the closer we get to nature, the higher the organic nurture that we experience. And it's kind of this, it's almost like there's a spiritual step in, this stair step that's sitting in front of us and we can't see it. It's slightly invisible. But every time we end up doing something like this, we go, oh yeah, that was one of the steps that was laid out for us. And anybody could have done it. There was a lot of people that could have done it or should have done it. And it just so happened that for whatever reason, it showed up in our pathway and we took that step and we took the risk and we ended up with this really beautiful, magical concoction that I love so deeply. And it's made such an impact on my life. So anyway, I can't wait for you to try it. I'm going to be sending you a big batch of it so that you get an opportunity to play with it and yeah, let us know how we can help your rungites get some of that too. I'll make sure and make it available. All right.
I love that, Mark. All right, brother. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to try it. And I know you said it'll be out in 3 weeks, so it'll be out a week or two after this show goes live. So we'll put links in the show notes. And of course,